I've never really given a huge amount of thought to the BBC presenter and journalist Amol Rajan. I mean, he's just part of the wallpaper, isn't he? I mean, he's a family man, 4 kids. He started off as a researcher on the right stuff, and then he became a sort of newspaper columnist and reporter. Then he got involved in the BBC. He worked on Radio 2, and then on Radio 4, and latterly he has been the quizmaster, following on from Bamba Gascoigne on University Challenge. So I was a bit surprised to see the amount of animosity and hatred towards him in the comments section of yesterday's article about him in the Daily Mail, which was a simple story. There was nothing to it. I think the headline was something like Amol Rajan is leaving the BBC. He's going off to do other things. When I read through the comments, which I don't normally do, obviously, because it's a particularly unpleasant thing to do, I did wonder whether or not there had been an outbreak of rabies in the UK since I've left. I can't explain it any other way. I mean, there are a couple of real non-stories happening in the UK news at the moment. I mean, stories which the media are desperately trying to sort of pump up into something, but it's like kind of, you know, when you have to pump up those airbeds and there's a great big hole in it, but you don't kind of realise for a while. So you're pumping and pumping, but nothing's happening. Well, it's a little bit like that with the 2 stories today in the UK. The first, of course, is Suella Braverman's move to reform. I mean, I can't think of a more yawn story than that. She says she is coming home, and I don't know, it was all very kind of almost like a sort of, I don't know, the denouement of a romantic movie as she arrives on the stage and hugs Nigel Farage and says, "At last I'm home." And then, of course, she does the normal thing where she then talks for 20 minutes about, firstly, how Britain is broken. I don't know where this Britain is broken has come from. And yes, Britain is a country that's struggling, but I don't think we can blame entirely the politicians for Britain being broken. When we've got an outbreak of rabies happening amongst the population, as I will illustrate in a moment. And then the other story, which is a complete non-story, is the Labour Party preventing Andy Burnham from standing in a Manchester constituency when he's already got a perfectly good job as the Mayor of Manchester. I mean, it's one of the top civil servants' jobs in the country. And clearly, as an organisation, the Labour Party aren't going to want him to vacate that and then sort of come into the party and start causing trouble. I mean, they don't have to, and why should they? You know, it's not a big deal. But of course, you know, Times Radio and that lot are all got their YouTube thumbnails saying Starmer will be gone in 6 weeks. I mean, they've been saying that since, well, almost since Neanderthal times, actually. You know, since the beginning of the dawn of civilization, they have been predicting that Starmer will go by Tuesday. But that isn't going to rock his boat. But, you know, and I've also been very concerned that I might be turning into a kind of a version of Owen Jones, who is another Britain is broken, the Labour Party is broken, Starmer will be gone by Tuesday channel. All of these things exist in a bubble of their own. They have absolutely no relevance to reality whatsoever. But what I've got to say, I think, has a little bit of relevance to reality because I'm dealing with real people, and I'm going to have a look at the responses in the Daily Mail comments to this innocuous, rather boring story that Amol Rajan is leaving the BBC. after many years to go and do his own thing. Nothing much in the story about the guy. I never really thought about this guy. I mean, you know. Anyway, let's have a look, shall we? Let's see. And you can decide yourselves whether or not this is just how English people now think and speak, or certainly write, or whether or not there is a rabies virus is spreading amongst the population. So let's have a look. So Pete says, weird guy, his head and body are not in proportion. Okay, all right, fair enough. Strutter says, see ya. Well worn out says, hooray. Johnny Silverhand says, I've never heard of him. He looks like some bloke who should be washing my feet in India. I suppose that is a reference to the fact that he is has got a look like a kind of ethnic minority look. The idea, I guess, being that anybody who isn't sort of white should be washing my feet in India. I'm glad this guy isn't my neighbour. That's all I can say. 30 Red says, excellent news. It's excellent news that he's leaving the BBC, but I thought most of the mail readers hated the BBC and never ever would watch this propaganda woke TV station, so I don't know. Good. Stuart says, I'm sick and tired of his patronising attitude in University Challenge. He has the answers written down for him. I think that is the point of being a quizmaster, that you have the answers and then you tell them. Someone else who I'm not going to give any publicity says, seriously, who is this squinty-eyed Packy? I'm sorry to use language. The last time I heard an abusive tirade of this type and that kind of language would have been in about 1977, actually, in London. He has a speech impediment, says Sarah Lemon. Okay, I didn't realise. I thought he had rather a good speaking voice. There are some people who, to me, definitely have got some kind of virus going on. I mean, it has to be. This isn't normal behaviour. It's the voice of reason, who we should perhaps call the voice of no reason whatsoever. This great news, I can't stand him. Buddy Blossom says, cheerio. Marion says, ghastly man. By the way, there are 1,000 of these, and I'm not missing any out. And this is what they're all like. I read them so you don't have to. Master of none, he'll disappear like a wet fart. And then Sarah responds, he won't disappear, he'll linger. Linger. I mean, to me, this is so, it's not even infantile, actually. It's not even animalistic. I mean, there's more, a robin in the garden has more integrity and pride and kindness than any of these people. I don't know what is going on. Maybe you can tell me. Oh, don't worry. There'll be another smug, sanctimonious lefty to take his place. He won't be missed. Ruprecht says, it'd be better if he left the country. Naff off, mush, you won't be missed, says Rousler. It's a very cold world for his type outside the BBC. He'll be back soon. I don't know whether I can be bothered to go on anymore. As I said, there are 1,000 of these. It makes my blood boil. Deport him, says Homer Simpson of Guildford. Health Snow says, this guy loves the sound of his own voice. Pete says, creepy, talentless individual, so the BBC will make him a millionaire. Leila says, Amol, you plonker. It's guys like this that make the BBC unwatchable. Poor elocution, can't enunciate, smug, no talent. Cancel your direct debit. He, angry of dove holes of Buxton, says he's crap. Amol thinks he's big. He's a Rodney, says Riddleman. Turnip says of Manchester says, I don't like him. I wish he would leave University Challenge. Patricia says, me too. Mrs. McCorber of Chester says, we have to have the subtitles on when he's on. In other words, they can't even stand the sound of his voice. Do you want me to carry on like this? I despair of him by then. Slimy, says Youngham. Irritating. He rattles his gold bangles. Spursicus says, funny, creepy little guy. Wally Doodle says, bye, with lots of ease. He assaults my senses. Plonker. I'm just reading them out now. I've stopped listening. He's grating. Leave the country. Good. Please go from University Challenge as well. I stopped listening to him years ago. Anyone would be foolish to employ him. Very irritating, says Excommune. By then never liked it. He's absolute rubbish, says Ted. I mean, the thing about this Amol Rajan is that, you know, he really is the sort of most benign character. I mean, he's affable, he's intelligent, he's kind of amiable, and he's smart, and he works hard, you know. He gets up every morning and he goes to work, and I can't see that he deserves this kind of thing. Paste Linen Sofa says he's the crook he always wanted to be. The Nation Moors, he's crap. He'll be chasing money. He looks like a gangster rapping chav. He's an idiot. Stopped watching. Defund the BBC, somebody said out of the blue. If only the rest of them would go too. Do they mean the rest of the BBC journalists or the rest of the Asian community? I think it means the Asian community. We got rid of him, like not from the BBC, but we'd like to get him out of the country. So, yeah. I mean, that is hate speech, isn't it, really? Lots of unsufferables, defund, like a rat in a sinking ship. Hooray. Moulin Man says, vile little man. And, well, I'm in, 60? Do you really want to hear another 940? No, you don't, of course. Some of the things here, actually, I haven't written out because they are just pure hate speech and incredibly racist. But I think I've given you a sense. So, you know, this is a situation where I sometimes think, you know, the politicians really at the cause of broken Britain, or have the people themselves descended into a kind of rabid, visceral hatred of almost everything. I've already done 2 videos, or very similar videos, about Lily Allen and the way that the abuse that she gets online from English people or British people. And also Greta Thunberg. Yeah, you know, you can't even say her name without people wanting to start their rants. And I'm just wondering where does it all stem from? I mean, Amol Rajan would be a kind of perfect neighbour, wouldn't he? I mean, he'd be respectful and quiet and reasonable and a family guy and a full-time job and not a drug taker, and he wouldn't be, you know, he's not going to be blasting out reggae at 3 a.m. He's not going to be violent. He's not going to kick your fence over. And yet there is this visceral hatred towards him. These people don't know him. He's never really said or done anything controversial or weird or peculiar. Just done his job. And he's done a good job. Is it a self-hatred that is being manifested? I mean, I suppose the cliched arguments would be that it's self-hatred, or that it's some kind of resentment or bitterness, or that he is a signifier for something. That when they look at Amol Rajan, it signifies something, not a man, not a human, not a Brit, not a journalist, not a BBC guy, no, but something else. And what could that signifier be? A signifier is, you know, an Asian-looking man who's doing well. Okay, and what is signified in their minds? Because it's not an Asian, it's not a nice, gentle Asian family man who's doing well. Something else is signified. It is a kind of pure hatred, but what is that? Pure hatred is a manifestation of something else. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's a kind of, I think it's probably basically primitive racism, a kind of very primitive tribal type of racism where we don't like outsiders here, you know, that kind of thing. And that he represents in some way a kind of loss of purity of the tribe. And in effect, most of these things are not kind of rational comments. They are, and they're not just visceral hate comments, but it's disgust, actually. They're disgusted by him. It doesn't make me feel like coming back to the UK in many ways, if this is where it is going. But I don't know whether or not this is a kind of minority sport, this level of hatred, or whether this is a kind of rabid virus which has seeped into the nation as a whole. I don't know what your opinions are, but yeah, I didn't really want to do something that was depressing, but this does depress me in some ways. So I'm going to have to look on the bright side of life and try and find something positive next time.